All right. We want to thank our co-host, the Danley Point team, for co-hosting these special Florida food forums on the USDA the USDA Discrimination Financial Assistance Program, otherwise known as DFAP. And we also want to acknowledge the collaborators who are working in the state of Florida. We have the Land Loss Prevention Project. And the Land Loss Prevention Project was founded in 1982 by the North Carolina Association of Black Lawyers to curtail the epidemic losses of Black-owned land in North Carolina. The Land Loss Prevention Project was incorporated in the state of North Carolina in 1983. The organization broadened its mission in 1993 to provide legal support and assistance to all financially distressed and limited resource farmers and landowners in North Carolina. The Land Loss Prevention Project's advocacy for financial distressed and limited resource farmers involves action in three separate arenas: litigation, public policy, and promoting sustainable agriculture and the environment. We would also like to acknowledge the Windsor Group. The Windsor Group was founded in 2007. The Windsor Group provides professional services and business solutions to federal government agencies. It aims to first understand the mission and challenges facing organizations, and then works diligently to provide the requisite ideas, solutions, and resources to address the client's needs and challenges identified. They deliver results based on their management commitment of performance excellence, anchored on the principles of quality customer service, trust, and strong client relationships, with the goal of achieving optimal success for their clients. And last but not least, we have the Rural Coalition. The Rural Coalition is one of the most diverse of all rural organizations. The Rural Coalition is an alliance of farmers, farm workers, indigenous, immigrant, and working people from throughout the Northern Hemisphere who work to develop capacities of rural organizations and people to secure systemic change in order to protect and sustain their land and their communities. It was founded in 1978 and since then has worked for 45 years to advance the interests of historically underserved producers and rural communities, and the rural communities the coalition serves. So please look up more information on those, and I think their links to their website are being put in the chat. And also, I just want to give a brief description about the Florida Food Policy for those of you who don't know. The Florida Food Policy Council creates opportunities to collaborate, celebrate, and advance equitable food policy to improve quality of life. The Florida Food Policy Council builds a culture of health rooted in equity through food justice by connecting the community to their food and the food system. The Florida Food Policy places the well-being of our communities at the center of every aspect of its life and work. We are a grassroots organization based in community engagement and in action. This food forum and webinar series we've been doing these, I think, since October to kind of promote and get people to know more about the DFAP program and engage with farmers and other producers and see if they're eligible. So please share this information if you're on the call with anyone who you come into contact with. And at this time, I am going to introduce today's presenter, Attorney Quentin Robinson. Quentin Robinson is a seasoned litigation attorney, recognized for his expertise in legal advocacy and dispute resolution. He has a strong commitment to public service and has played multifaceted roles, serving as a policy advisor for the Rural Coalition, where he has contributed significantly to shaping policies that address the unique challenges faced by rural communities. Quentin Robinson brings a wealth of experience from his tenure as a political appointee in the Obama White House, showcasing his dedication to national leadership and public administration. Additionally, his valuable insights to agricultural matters have been honed through his service as a congressional staff on the White House Agriculture Committee. This further solidified his reputation as a knowledgeable and impactful figure in both the legal and policy spheres. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Attorney Quentin Robinson.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. And thank you for the work that you're doing on the 22007 application process. The time is really winding down on us, and so we need to get the paperwork from the farmers, get the applications filed so that there's enough time to have some review process. And so if you can see the screen, you'll see at the top where it says draft of a real narrative. So what I've provided you is some numbered paragraphs of documents that you will need to prove substantial proof of farm loan discrimination. Substantial proof is a very low legal standard of evidentiary proof, and so substantial proof is basically um, the presentation of a certain level of evidence to prove that it was more likely than not that discrimination was the real reason for the adverse farm loan discrimination decision. So we're really talking about a standard that says in all of the documents that we present on an application and all of the writing that we do in a narrative, it's more likely than not that discrimination was present or a motivating factor in the adverse farm loan and the adverse farm loan decision. So if everybody can see the first, and anybody can stop me at any time because I want this to be give and take so that it's useful. And so on paragraph number 1, you want to submit your deeds, your wills, trust where a particular farmer received property from their parents' will, and that shows that you own the farm, that you're operating the farm, and you want to show front, not the whole mortgage, because a mortgage can be 17 to 20 pages, but just the front page and the back page of the mortgage, your tax records. Obviously, we all know by now that you need your farm at your USDA Farm Service Agency identification number. Let's say if the farmer was renting land, then you want to show written proof of that rental agreement. If the farmer was the lessor or the lessee, you still want to show written proof of that agreement. If you did it on a handshake, then obviously you're not going to have written proof. But if you could get an affidavit from the lessor or the lessee, that would be helpful to show the full story of your farm loan application. And and the reason these like ancillary documents are important is because it helps to show the reviewer what your farm business plan was. And so in other words, an example would be if you intended to operate 100 acres in the year that you applied for a loan, and you had proof that 20 of the 100 acres would come from your neighbor next door, well then, and you put that in your application, and USDA ignored the 20 acres, then that could go as a fact basis to show failure to evaluate, failure to examine your farm loan application in the way that it should have been evaluated, or in a way that your non-minority counterparts received a better evaluation than the evaluation that you received. So that's found at paragraph number 3, if you can see the screen. Now you'll see where beside every paragraph and subparagraph I have what it says, see exhibit number. You want to get these documents and you want to put your exhibits on them, right? Because that helps the reviewer to understand and to follow the narrative of your documents, because your documents will tell the story in most cases, but not all, but in most cases better than your narrative will. Okay, so if everybody can find your way to paragraph number 4, farm business plan documents. Anything that shows that you had a farm business plan, and your farm business plan may not have been as formal as it should have been, but anything to show that you had a farm business plan, such as your farm loan application, because that farm loan application will have sections on it that says, how many acres do you intend to farm? What type of equipment do you have? What type, how much are you going to use for fertilizer, et cetera, right? So your farm loan application can be a source of presentation for your farm business plan. Okay, and so you'll see scattered throughout here, you'll see where it says 12 CFR 1002.m. That's the section in the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, which applies to farm loans, that deals with adverse actions based on race, gender, age. Could be retaliation. It could be source of income. So if we get this done soon enough and you get it up to us for review, we can go into your narrative and place the appropriate section of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, so that the reader will know that, for example, if USDA told a particular farmer during the application process, Jim, you're getting on up there in age. Are you sure that you want to get a loan? Well, then that's age discrimination within the farm loan process. So a particular section within the Equal Credit Opportunity Act will deal with age discrimination. And if that statement is a statement that's in the narrative, then we would attach 1002.2 MNOP all the way through the Equal Credit Opportunity Regulations, equal credit opportunity regulations, to show what type of discrimination actually happened, right? So and so when you're helping the farmers to write their narratives, always say adverse action. And then an adverse action is obviously something that is bad that happened to the farmer. USDA may have had a valid reason for its adverse action. Adverse action could be denial of the loan, denial of loan servicing, funding the loan at a very low amount, okay? Or when you get to loan servicing, an adverse action could be default, acceleration, and foreclosure. All of those are adverse actions. So always give the adverse action a name. So one example would be the adverse action was unlawful acceleration and foreclosure, or unlawful denial of the appropriate loan amount, or unlawful delay of providing the loan. Always give that bad thing, which is the adverse action, a name. Tell us what it was. Then the next thing is you just can't say, that was an adverse action. You have to give a date that that adverse action happened. What date did this bad thing happen to the farmer? And typically, if you're looking at a USDA document, it'll say on this date, we are denying your loan. Or on this date, we are denying your loan servicing. So that's the date of the adverse action. Okay, so let's say, for instance, if you could go to four subparagraph C, you'll see farm loan promissory notes. Your proof of adverse action in denial of the farm loan from FSA could be that you got a promissory note from your family member or from the credit union, and that the terms and conditions of that promissory note could be harsh terms, high interest rates, short-term payback. So you want to attach your promissory note and even your mortgage from another source that you had to get in order to farm for that particular year, but you had to get it from a source other than USDA at a higher interest rate, quick payback terms and conditions, et cetera, et cetera. And receipts of items that you bought, such as fuel, seed, fertilizer, farm labor. Put all those receipts together, make copies of them in nice, presentable pages, one receipt per page, because those receipts can show, and this is an example on a real case, the farmer purchased diesel fuel at the local service station or the local gas station at a higher price. If the farmer had gotten the farm operating loan, he could have bought the diesel fuel at a bulk rate and stored it in his diesel tank on the farm. So that shows the consequences of the farm loan denial when you have to spend more money for the same inputs from a source that obviously charges a lot more. Okay, and so if you look at paragraph 5 where it says annual list of farm equipment, that's important because a farmer may have requested a loan to buy farm equipment, and USDA denied the loan for one reason or another when it came to farm equipment. So what this tells us is the farmer had to operate in a less efficient manner, such as he had to pay a custom harvester to come and cut the crop or harvest the crop at a higher rate where it lowered the profitability. Or in one case, the farm loan manager knew that the farmer in 2014 was cutting the beans with a combine that was manufactured and delivered in 1965. So it's using very, very old equipment, very inefficient. And the U.S. Farm Loan officer knew that the combine was 1965 combine being used in 2016, but the farm loan manager still denied the use of operating funds to purchase an updated combine. So that's a form of farm loan discrimination when FSA says you can't use your farm monies to update your equipment. Okay, so paragraph 6, it just gives you not all, but some of the reasons that you may have faced discrimination: age, race, national origin, sex, religion. Religion is a big one, believe it or not. And source of income. So in other words, if the farmer is retired, living on retirement income and Social Security income, the farm loan manager may have made a statement to the effect that you don't have a real job, you don't have a good paying job, you're only on Social Security. That's a form of discrimination because the Equal Credit Opportunity Act prohibits discrimination based on source of income. Another way of looking at it is, the farm loan manager may say, "Hey, John, I know you're, taking care of your mom and you're using your mom's retirement monies to run this farm. That's not a good source of income." So once again, that is a form of Equal Credit Opportunity Act discrimination because an evaluation was made on the loan application based on the source of income to run the farm. So be on the lookout for any statements from the farmer that talks about negative statements about where the farmer got his or will be getting his funds from to repay the loan or to run the operation. So while I'm on the topic of income, I want to talk about uh, a form of discrimination called good faith stripping. Like you strip something, good faith stripping. USDA regulation says that if a borrower requests farm loan servicing, the borrower must be in the status of a good faith borrower. A good faith borrower status is the beginning of the farmer's status within the farm loan process. What we found is, or what I found is, USDA will say, John, we don't like liars. We know, John, you went on that vacation. Or we know, John, you drink too much. And after that statement is made, USDA eliminates farm loan servicing based on the fact that USDA stripped the good faith borrower status from the farmer without justification. So when you talk to your farmers, ask them the question, did he ever say anything about you being a liar? Or did they ever say anything about, what you do or what you don't do in the community? And use that negative information to evaluate your application. That's called good faith stripping, and it's prohibited by the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. So be on the lookout. Be on the lookout for instances of unlawful, discriminatory, good faith stripping. All right. So another form of discrimination that you have to be on the lookout for is, an example would be, "Hey, John, I know your dad farmed 1,000 acres. He was a good man. He was a smart farmer. But, John, I just don't understand, or nobody in this community understands why your dad, a minority, was able to farm 1,000 acres and he didn't have a mortgage." And then after that, they deny John's application, or they deny John's mortgage, or they loan, or they deny John um, farm loan servicing. So that's called association discrimination. So in other words, my dad is dead, so my name is John. My farm loan application was examined and evaluated based on my dead dad. So that's a prohibition under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. If I bring in my application, you have to evaluate my application based on what I do or what I don't do, not what my dad did or what my dad didn't do. So be careful, or be on the lookout, that when you're talking to farmers and there is a reference to your dad, your uncle, we foreclosed on your dad. So how you think you're gonna do? What you gonna do to keep us from foreclosing on you? That's discrimination because you brought in my dad's situation to evaluate my brand new farm loan application. Be on the lookout for that. Okay. Or one other example would be, John, farm loans were really made for college educated boys, but you boys, y'all pick crops. You've been over and you pick vegetables. People who pick vegetables don't need to own farms. That's association discrimination. So be on the lookout and see if you know of any of those statements were made within the process. Okay. So if you look at paragraph number 7, if you have any marketing agreements, whether large or small, you may have a small CSA, community supported agriculture agreement with, 50 or 60 people. Redact the names, the private names out of, and attach those agreements, because that shows that you had a farm marketing agreement to sell your crop, but USDA did not give the proper credibility to those marketing agreements because they were too small, or they were, agreements to sell to a certain type of people and not what USDA thought should be marketing to. Okay, and then talk about the farmer's education, college, manager at UPS, manager at Delta Airlines, manager wherever that person worked. They had management skills. Talk about whether they graduated from a land grant university. Talk about their farm experience. So put all of that data in, because it's going to show that the farmer was eligible to participate in the farm loan program because they had the adequate management skills and the adequate farm background. So what you see after that uh, is a narrative outline. And so it really talks about a real life situation. And I'll just go through it a little bit. And I'm going to stop in about 5 minutes to see if there are any questions. So basically, one example would be, and I already gave it, but I'll talk about it again. The African American farmer wanted to buy the farm behind him that he had been renting. USDA delayed the process, and a white farmer bought the farm from the black lady that had been renting to the black guy's dad and granddad forever. 2 years later, or maybe 3 years later in this case. So in other words, efficiency in farming is, if I have 100 acres on street A, and there's 100 acres one street over on street B, that's going to make me an efficient farmer, because I can keep my equipment in the same place. I don't have to drive my combine or tractor 15, 20 miles down the road, so I can be efficient. So what USDA did in this particular case is they allowed the gentleman to have a farm ownership loan, but the farm was 52 miles away. The farm that was right in the back of him, they wouldn't let him. They wouldn't allow him to buy it. So who does that unless there's some discrimination? And once again, the white guy owns the farm. So if you run into situations where the minority farmer wants to buy the land from their parent, grandparent, or whomever, and that loan is denied, assuming they were eligible for the loan, try to find a way to connect the dots to show that that's discrimination. Because what we see is farmland transition for the minority community is very chaotic, very cacophonous, meaning it's just all over the place. It never really works smoothly, right? But farm loan transition for the non-minority community is very smooth. White farmer wants to transfer the farm to son or daughter, very smooth. USDA checks off on it, approves it, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not the same case when you're trying to transfer the farm from black father to black son or black daughter. Except that's just an example. So be on the lookout for farmland transaction discrimination. It exists, it is live, and you will find it in one area or another. And then the other example I want to talk about is the sex discrimination. USDA will say, okay, we'll see your dad passed away. We'll see he left you girls 1,000 acres in his will. How you girls gonna run this farm? Um, see, one of you girls just got out of the hospital. So shouldn't you go home and worry about your health? So those little statements like that, you have to be on the lookout for them, because what just happened right there with those two negative discriminatory statements is that we have sex discrimination, how you girls gonna run the farm, and we have American with Disability Act discrimination, which is, I see you just got out of the hospital. I see that you're disabled. So why do you want a loan? Or and then they deny the loan. Okay. So be on the lookout for these little statements that are a component of the loan adverse action, which means the adverse action that turned out to be a denial, or the adverse action that turned out to be a denial of farm loan servicing. Okay. So that is all that I have, and I am willing to take a few questions.
Thank you so much, Quentin, for giving that presentation. Um, I will just start us off with a question or kind of a statement. Can you tell us more about how to incorporate policy, practice, and pattern in the application to really solidify what happened and document your narrative?
Right. You have to be very, very careful about using policy, pattern, and practice discrimination. It's it's really a lower level of proof. It's really a type of proof of discrimination that can't be used with an individual farmer. You can't hang your hat on it as an individual farmer, but policy, pattern, and practice is that we have one regulation. It's on the books, it's been on the books for a while, but that regulation is implemented or applied in an awkward way towards minority farmers, but it's applied in a more favorable way to non-minority farmers. So in other words, to be succinct and to be successful in trying to prove discrimination based on a policy, pattern, and practice, you have to identify the regulation that was, or that defines the policy. You really you gotta identify it. And I think sometime later tomorrow, I will send out an example on policy, pattern, and practice. You got to identify which policy they used. Then you have to show what pattern did they use this. They always use this particular policy on Friday evenings at 4 p.m., which is typically the time when working minority farmers are free to come into the office, right? So the policy, pattern, and practice has to be used pretty much the same way every time in a negative way towards a particular minority group. So I'll send something out on that, just so that, when you're helping the farmers draft their narrative, you have more of a written guide point to follow. Any more questions?
Uh, Quentin, this is Danny Bismarck. Um, could you possibly speak to a framework or a methodology that the TAs could utilize that clearly sets apart the policy, pattern, and practice, and almost this adverse action approach, which you've outlined in this presentation? Could you just give us sort of a framework for how we should approach it? Because I think TAs in the last week have heard the policy, pattern, practice, and this adverse action. But in order, when we're speaking with the farmers, you know, we're not legally trained as such, but it does seem as there's an evolving methodology that we're adapting and trying to incorporate into how we're writing up this narrative. And first of all, thank you. This is great, and it's really helpful. But are you seeing this as a way in which we can generally approach the writing of this? Because it does clarify things, but at the same time, we just need some very, very fundamental approaches that we can use as we're going through the application. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Well, once again, be careful how you use it because it's difficult to prove. Policy, pattern, and practice is easier to find in mortgage discrimination. In particular, we call it redlining, right? If you go and just Google red line mortgage discrimination and just type in Bank of America or Wells Fargo, you're gonna see, and you could probably just Google it while I'm talking now, policy, pattern, and practice in mortgage fraud or mortgage discrimination. It's going to talk about what it is, right?
Right.
And typically it applies to a group of farmers. It can't, policy, pattern, and practice doesn't apply to one farmer or perhaps not even two farmers. It has to be a systematic discriminatory approach that's applied to all Black people in this neighborhood, right? Or you could even Google policy, pattern, and practice in automobile financing. It's huge, 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 huge. Everybody Black that walks in to get a car finance that's working class, they get a higher interest rate that's not justified. Or they get these other tacked on fees that's not justified and that are not charged in the non-minority community. So I will draft something and send it out. But if you just want to read it on your own, look at the automobile finance policy, discrimination in automobile finance, and then type in policy, pattern, and practice. Type in mortgage financing. Type in the same thing, uh, policy, pattern, practice of discrimination. You're going to find a host of legal cases and even just legal articles on fraud in the more discrimination in mortgage and car finance. So
So,
mortgage and car finance is way, way, way different than farm loans. So be careful not to compare apples to oranges, but talk, I would even get a group of farmers together on a phone call and just talk to them and say, have you seen this before? Has this ever happened to you before? Then that way you can sort of develop a policy, pattern, and practice within your local community that each farmer can use in their individual application. And then more importantly, one farmer can draft a affidavit for his neighbor's 22007 application. So you have that extra level of proof of discrimination because another farmer can say, I'm in this neighborhood. I dealt with the same USDA, the same loan officer, and I experienced this same type of discrimination in the process. So talk to each other, compare notes, and see if you can develop a policy, pattern, and practice that was more negative and more of an adverse action on the minority side than it was on the non-minority side.
and so to follow up that question specifically, Quentin, I can definitely see that on a local scale, but it also practically extends itself into a national scale. And because we as collaborators and TAs, et cetera, who are working on this, is this something that is, as a result of this process, it's kind of inherent in the process, is that this pattern is actually, we're seeing this countrywide. So isn't that in and of itself something that speaks to the policy pattern and practice?
Yes and no, because you have to be careful. Policy pattern and practice is almost like the developing a class of litigants in a class action. Okay, look at it like this: the same train wreck, the same train company, the same date of the train wreck, the same passengers were on the same train. So in other words, it almost have to be the same group of people, the same bad actor, and the same bad policy. Okay, let's switch to another day. Same train company, same policy, but different riders on the train, and nothing bad happened on the train, right? You only get something bad to happen on the train. This is an outlandish example, but I want to make the point. Only bad, harmful things happen on the train when the train is loaded with black farmers. You see what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
so let's say, for instance, if you try to do a policy pattern in practice, and something bad happened on Greyhound bus while something happened on Amtrak. The injured on the bus cannot use the policy pattern in practice, obviously, on Amtrak. You see how the distinction is? So
Right.
you can use it, but be careful that you are as close as possible, or you are as perfect as possible of being same farmer, same farm loan FSA officer, same type of crop, etc., etc. Do you have to be that perfect? No, but get as close as possible, because you don't want the reviewers to say, "Hey, this is apples to grapes comparison. I don't see it." You see what I'm saying?
Yep,
So,
got it.
I'm exaggerating this a little bit, and the reason I'm exaggerating this is because I don't want you to think that the discussion of a pattern policy practice is a winner all the time. It is not. You see what I'm saying? And
Right.
so let's say you're in watermelon country in Florida, minority farmers. All the watermelon farmers get their loans on time except when you're black. Okay, all black watermelon farmers get their loans late. Now we got a policy pattern in practice because we got black farmers, we got one crop, which is watermelon, and we got an adverse action, which is getting the loans late. Because if you don't put the transplants in the ground on the right time, and you don't fertilize at the right time, you're not going to be able to go to market when everybody else goes to market. If you don't go to market on time, you're going to be looking around how you're going to sell these million watermelons, right?
Right.
So same crop, same farm loan officer, same minority group, same or similar adverse action.
Thank you,
Thank you
Quentin.
so much. Thank you so much, Quentin. This is Erica Hall. In the interest of time and being respectful, we just have a last few questions. One was, can you define regarding veterans, women, people with disabilities, and how they can present their case? And then there was also a comment around what you mentioned, farmers. What about hemp farmers? Would that be a category where they can show they were discriminated against? We know that Black hemp farmers are rare, and for years they have been denied their licenses. So if they were denied, they should be able to show that they were discriminated against as well.
Okay, you got to say hemp was recently allowed to be financed by USDA. Hemp farms were recently allowed to be financed by USDA. I cannot remember the year, but USDA does not, I think I'm right on this, but tell me if I'm not. USDA does not issue a hemp license. A hemp license may come from some state agency, right? A hemp license necessarily does not deal with a farm loan. This program is limited to farm loan discrimination. So you really wouldn't have, wouldn't have program eligibility if you base your application on, or base this application on, denial of a hemp license. Okay, so if it has to be related to something that happened within the farm loan making process or the farm loan servicing process. So you gotta close that gap and make sure that everything that you put in this application deals with what happened or what did not happen within the farm loan context.
Great, thank you. And then one more comment in the chat from Cheryl. I don't know if you want to come off mute, but I think it's very important what you put in, which may be a key part of discrimination, that she worked with a farmer that was told to use their house as collateral, but their equipment was more than enough. And can that be used as discrimination? Cheryl from Danley Point, would you like to expand on that? And that'll close us out.
I think there's one hand raised to M. Ebbett, and so we probably can take them as well very quickly.
Well, if I am to respond to the question about collateral.
Yes, please.
Yeah, on the collateral, be careful, be very, very careful how you present that as a form of discrimination, because the USDA regulation says that the USDA has a right for 120% collateral, something like that. So don't just say I was over collateralized, because the law says that they can get 120% of collateral, but they do have discretion. And so I put quotes around the word discretion. You only use the 120% collateral rule against blacks, but you don't use the 120% collateral rule against non-minorities, right? So yes, you can use it, but you need to show that USDA abused its authority on the 120% collateral rule, which is basically take everything you got, your social, your retirement, I mean, your house, everything, whether or not they only use the 120% collateral rule when it's a minority producer. They don't do it with others. So if you can tie the knots together and show that the discretion was used in a discriminatory manner, now we're going somewhere. But if it's just if you're just saying they took a collateral on everything that I have, they can do that, but they just can't do it for some farmers and not for others. So yes, but be careful that you connect the dots.
Thank you so much. Were there any final questions or comments?
Yes. I'm speaking from a farmer's perspective of this in the 22007. And listening at Attorney Robertson, when I look back, I applied for a loan back in 2003. Fortunately, I just yesterday received the email that the USDA found all my records. Fortunately, I have my actual letters from where I first, back then you had to fill out, I don't know, was it form 2243? They had all these numbers back then that you had to I even have the direct document that where I first signed off for me to even be able to do the loan. So like what Attorney Robinson was saying, his first introduction. Okay, you had to fill out this thing. I call it like a little Bible, Old Testament and New Testament back then for to even get a loan. And I went through the process, kind of like just what he said. I tried to get back then, I think maybe $100,000. I got totally denied. So it was kind of like on my mind. So I called my loan officer back, which her name was Charlotte Blackburn. And I said, Miss Blackburn, can you just give me a chance to let me prove myself? Because I was growing tobacco at the time. And I was like, just give me a chance. Well, I put in the loan. I can't wait to get my records, but I think I had asked for like $100,000 to grow tobacco. Well, I don't know if she feels sorry for me or whatever the case was. She just automatically said, Michael, I'm going to give you a chance. She gave me a whopping $3,000. Well, I got the $3,000, which was enough just to pay the labor for 1 week. When you're growing tobacco, it's about 8 consecutive weeks of, labor costing anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 a week. However, in any event, I paid the $3,000 back. And I wanted to do some upgrade equipment. Pretty much, my story pretty much is the same like Mr. Robinson started off with, to buy some more equipment. However, I was eventually the next year was able to get what you call an equipment loan. So during that year, I had a bad hurricane. Well, come to find out, when I got my loans, when I get my check from the tobacco company, which I had a contract with Reynolds Tobacco Growing Company in Madison, Florida, it was controlled. Like other words say, like if they loaned me the $50,000, okay, I didn't just get $50,000 and put in my bank account. It was controlled like I was a child. Like I said, okay, I need a tire for my tractor. I had to call in that Wednesday to get the money by Friday. When I got my checks from the USDA, when I got my check from the tobacco company that said to Michael Brown and USDA, I watched several $1,000s that, you like, man, I done made this money. You couldn't even put your hands on it. Of course, they guaranteed to get their money back. So that's why I said to Michael Brown and USDA. But anyway, long story, the short version, it got bad, had a couple of hurricanes, couldn't pay the money back. I didn't know that my buddies up the road, there was a thing called loan forgiveness. There was a thing called, they refinance you, take it, put it on the back, and they would loan them money and they farming right back the next year. I would never even given that kind of, I didn't even know nothing about that, So from a farmer perspective of, gathering all these papers, I'm 90% done with mine. I'm more fortunate than some of the other farmers. I know some farmers that they ain't got this paperwork. It was a known fact when you go to my local office, her name was Miss Sellers. When you got payment, she hated to see the black farmers get anything. We didn't know all the information. The other farmers got their money on time. They wasn't stipulated. You had to put up your wife, your house, your child, the goods in your house, all the stuff you had to list on the loan called chattel. And I'm not trying to take up all the time. So I'm just saying all that to say this. When I listen at this language, being a farmer, like you saying, you got to come up with this paper. You got to come up with your tax stuff. You got to remember some of this stuff happened back in 03, 02, which is not real long ago. But there are some farmers that stuff happened in the 70s, 80s, and my heart just goes out to the guys that's really discriminated. They can't put their hands on this paperwork. And I'm just hoping for me that when I do receive my papers from I'm just one of those that was fortunate enough. I just got the email yesterday, and they said that I should get it on Friday, December the 15th, all my loan records. And in my loan record, look at it alone, you will see where I got denied $100,000, and she did loan me $3,000 if they sent it, which was an insult. But you had to get what you get. These are real life stories, and it's it just brings back so much of bad memories to go back and rehash this stuff, to try to even hopefully get past it this time. I went to a thing, in my town here in a little small town, Quincy, Florida. I got friends that were farmers. I got some friends that when Joe Biden signed this last bill, that they was going to give you up to 120% debt relief. I had some guys and friends that was riding on this. And the white farmers started saying they were discriminated against, which to a result that where we are now. It's just stressful, but I'm just saying to dig up all these papers, put it together, and I don't know how the process go, like you were saying about the substantial evidence and the denial, but my paperwork, I guess, would just have to do the speaking for me because, and you know, my narrative is stressful. But however, in any event, I'm just speaking from a farmer, you know, getting up all this stuff and getting these documents, and it's a task. But however, you know, I'm just prayerfully doing all this that something comes out of it. So I was just saying from a farmer's perspective to dig up these paperwork and get all this stuff. And I'm just thankful I'm fortunate enough to be able to find mine, which doesn't make my case better or different than any other. But it's work, you know, trying to get it all together, go back up to the farm service agency, get all your farm numbers, which I have all that. I mean, it was right there for me when I went there to try to retrieve it. So I was just saying from a farmer perspective, getting this stuff together and then just to walk back through it, you know, it just brings back all the pain of what you went through to dig all this up again and, you know, just get slapped in the face, you know. So I just wanted to share that. I just wanted to say that. And thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Farmer Brown. We appreciate your story and thank you so much for sharing it. And we hope that you get some justice through this process. We did have one hand raised and I want to acknowledge that person, Evitt. If you would like to come off mute, I don't know if you still have the question, but if you would like to come off mute and briefly, because we're a little bit over time and we want to get out of here by 1:15 to honor everybody's time. So
Yes,
if,
I would just like to ask, um, is there any organization or any forum or any kind of outlet that just like how if you have a problem with employment, there's there's an administration or an area that you can go to and make a complaint so that you know, if you had some kind of discrimination concerning your employment, there's an office that you can go to or and make a complaint. Is there some kind of outlet available so that when there is a problem, we don't have to wait for a long time before this gets any complaint gets logged? And also, if there is, because that way I think some people who are getting, you know, having problems with their loan officers and their loans denied and all these other things, if there's something we can report to where this can happen quickly so that at least somebody can jump on it right away, knowing that it's logged, I think we might be able to change the spectrum of how things operate. But I don't know of any place, so if you could tell me some information as far as that goes, so that there's a place that you can say something and say it quickly, so that some kind of addressing could happen.
yes, and I see that Brenda put something in the chat and let me read it. And she says Farmers Legal Action Group, or FLAG, is working on a guide right now for instructions on this exact question, Mr. Abbott, and it should hopefully be available by the week after next. So
Okay, one more question, would Rel, is Mr. Brown mentioned the forgiveness. When does anybody know when or is this just totally on the Farmers Association where they can decide whether they want to forgive your financial obligation or not? Does anybody know how this actually gets enacted? Who could you speak to directly to impact a decision like that?
Well, loan forgiveness is obviously a farm loan servicing activity or farm loan servicing eligibility. So in other words, if you are delinquent on a loan, really there are two ways to get farm loan forgiveness. Let's say if there's a disaster, Congress makes or USDA makes the disaster declaration, then USDA will have a program that has a window, you know, maybe a 90-day window to submit your paperwork for farm loan forgiveness because of the disaster, right? That's one way. The second way would be if you are doing a restructuring of your farm loan at FSA as a part of a farm loan servicing, farm loan forgiveness could be a part of a restructuring plan. So once you engage in farm loan servicing and to make the farm operate in the future, USDA does have the authority to write down debt as a part of farm loan servicing. So you have to engage USDA in the farm loan servicing process and ask to see if that is an option.
All right, so we are going to have to end this session and this forum, but we do plan on doing other forums and sessions, so please be on the lookout through your emails. And please save the information in the chat so that you can continue to find out information and connect with those who are on the call who are trying to help farmers through this process. And so I'm just going to close it out very quickly here. And I want to thank Mr. Robinson for giving his presentation, and thank everyone for attending. We really, really appreciate it. And
yes, thank you, thank you, thank you.
yes, thank you. So what I'm gonna ask and say at this point is we want to thank our presenter, Attorney Quentin Robinson. We want to thank the Danley Point team, thank our collaborators, Rural Coalition, Land Loss Prevention. We especially want to thank the participants. Thank you for joining us today. And we also would like to thank the Florida Food Policy Council for helping us and giving us use of this platform so we could get the information out to everyone. Please remember that the Florida Food Policy Council is a volunteer-run organization and relies on donations, memberships, and sponsorships. So please, in this time and season of giving, consider donating by using the link in the chat or going to the website www.flfpc.org. And with that, I am going to wish everyone a wonderful day, and hopefully we will see you back. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any one of us. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
It's a shame when a woman spends all her time alone. And I am perfectly willing to give her everything she needs. I don't care about her past. I don't care what she's been through. I just wanna feel one night with good love, baby. That's all I wanna do. So baby, if you got that feeling, well, I wanna give you that midnight healing.
Hey, Sincerely, can you hear me?
You know what I'm talking about, yeah.
Hey, Erica.